Good day and welcome. My name is Dr. Johnny J. Chavez III, and today I will be presenting a micro session based on a writing program that I've developed over the past 4 years. It's called Voices with Change, and today we're going to be discussing writing with emotions. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's begin. Before we get started, I think it's important that we talk about the two objectives that I plan to focus on during this session. The first objective is how to approach writing, and the second one is writing with emotions, which will wrap it all up together. So let's jump in and let's get to the first objective and let's start going over that. As we begin this section of this micro lesson, we're going to discuss how to approach writing. And this is a very difficult and challenging thing for many individuals. So as we begin, the first thing that I want you to remember is this is all going to wind up focusing on emotions. But how do you write? What do you should be focusing on as you begin to write, and what should you think about? So one of the things that I like to do is I'd like to reference some great writers in history and what their thoughts are on writing. So the first one we'll begin is with a quote from Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And what he talks about, and it's the very first chapter, he talks about what he expects from his writers and what he says. He goes, "On my side, I require of every writer, first or last, a simple and sincere account of his own life." So he's saying, hey, look, if you're going to start writing, we want a simple, sincere account of your life. What is truly happening? It doesn't need to be lavish. It doesn't need to be extravagant. You don't have to do try to make it anything other than what it is, simple. And he goes, and not merely what he has heard of other men's lives, some such account as he would send to his kindred from a distant land. So he said, I don't want you to tell me of what you would expect me to hear as you were hearing from other people's lives, what they've gone through, what they've experienced. I don't want to hear that. I want you to tell me about, let's say you were writing to a family member, brother, mother, sister, somebody out there, and as if they were in a distant land. They didn't know anything about your country. They didn't know anything about where you lived or the environment, right? So you're writing a letter, you're trying to explain this type thing, or you're presenting facts and a real, honest, sincere account of your own life in your own words, and presenting it in a way to somebody that has never seen where you're at can see it, right? For if he has lived sincerely, it must have been in a distant land to me. So that's what he's saying. So when he reads what you write, it should be as that, hey, it is a new land. It's like, what if you lived on Mars and you were trying to explain what life on Mars was to somebody that's never been to Mars, never seen Mars, never experienced it, and you just can't simply Google it, and look up the answers. So that is how Henry David Thoreau first looks at writers and what he expects, giving a sincere account of their lives. And that's what I want you to focus on as you prepare to write, and you're thinking about your thought processes and how you're going to start moving forward. And the second quote that I would like to read to you and explain to you, it comes from the Element of Style. Now, this is a early 1900s writing grammar book, and it is still very, very relevant, and I really enjoy it. But I want you to think about, when you're talking about your, not only just being sincere and honest, I want you to think about your style. So, when we're talking, how are you going to write? What kind of style it is, and as it is, Henry David Thoreau wanted you to be honest. He wanted you to be sincere. But now, how do we put that into words that mean something, that it can show what we have inside of ourselves? So with that, I want you to take this is from the back of the book, and it says, "Style is an increment in writing. When we speak of Fitzgerald's style, we do not mean his command of the relative pronoun. We mean the sound his words make on paper. So from this, when you think about it, right, you're going to write a sincere, honest account of your life, or you're going to be sincere and honest in everything that you do write. And then I want you to think, it's not about being grammatical and being, showing that, oh yes, I know what a poem is. I know what, a sonnet is, and I know, a haiku, and I know how to do the format. That's not what you're focusing on. You're focusing on is what sound will your words make on paper. So that way, when somebody reads it, not only do they read it, they feel it, they can hear it, they can sense it, they can smell it, and it creates visual stimulation in their mind. And that's what I want you to think about when you're putting your words on paper. And it says, all writers, by the way they use the language, reveals something of their spirits, their habits, their capacities, and their biases. So when you're writing, if you're being sincere and you're being honest and you are really trying to show what sound your words make on paper, you will also put some of yourself on paper. And that's what this is focused on. It's going to show what type of spirit you have. It's going to show, talk about, your habits in some ways, your capacity and your biases. It's going to come out. If you're being honest and sincere, it's going to be there. And it says, and the text goes on, it says, this is inevitable as well as enjoyable. So no matter how you try, no matter what you do in your writing, it's always going to come out and it's going to say something. It's going to speak to people. It's going to make a sound that's going to entice them and just bring wonderful thoughts and joy to them, or invoke all kinds of emotions that they never even thought you could do, because it's the sound of your writing. And when you think about poetry or writing, and especially as this course, the Voices of Change, primarily focuses on poetry, when you're writing poetry, and if you're writing in this way, you are creating poetry again for the very first time. And the reason why I say that is because if you are writing sincere and honest, and you are focusing your emotions and your energies and your thoughts and revealing this inner self through your writing, you are creating poetry as no one has ever written it before. Because every time somebody writes, it is a new form. It speaks to people in different ways, and nobody writes poetry the way you do. So you've created something that has never existed before, and that is just simply phenomenal. So this section then is just really just thinking about how you're going to write and what you're going to do and how you're going to get there, and being sincere and honest, right? So what sound will your words make when you write? Think about it. Yeah, I think it'd be pretty good. All right, so let's move on to the next section. All right, now in this next section, we're going to talk about writing with emotions. In this section, I'm going to cover focusing on your emotions, use your emotions as you write, and just being honest with yourself. So one thing that I like to share with folks is that, as we go through our day-to-day processes, we take all of our emotions, our fears, our anxieties, our depressions, our anger, our depression, all of these things that may even be negative energies, and things that we may affect us, but we don't want anybody else to really know about it. We take all of those emotions that we hide, and we take them and we push them down inside, what I call, and put them in this inner vault, just deep down inside of you. And that's the only way I can explain it. We all do this. We take our emotions, our fears, our angers, our hatred, and we don't want to show them. We don't want to let it out, and we don't want to talk about it because just the memories, the pain is too real. And we take all this negative energy and we put it into this vault. And the thing is this emotional vault is like a pressure cooker, and we have to find some way to release all of this negative emotional energy that we have. And it's basically what I like to call is just a way of changing your negative energy that you're storing up and pushing it out and using it for something creative. Because what happens is as you allow that negative energy to build and build and build, eventually it's that pressure cooker, your vault, is gonna pop a seal, and it's gonna blow. It's gonna let out that steam, and it always seems to do it in the most inopportune time. Always when something happens, you finally get to a point, and then somebody, and maybe your child, and maybe your spouse, and maybe just a friend or something, it finally gets to a point, they say something, and that's the last little bit that pressure cooker can have, that vault, and it pops a seal, and you come out, what I say is, come out sideways outside of your neck, because you're just talking, it just bursts out and it comes out, and and you hurt their feelings. You say things that you shouldn't say. Things that might be mean and ugly, or you're just angry, defensive, and you just blow your top. And then afterwards, you're like, oh my God, why did I say that? I don't have no idea why I said that. I didn't mean it, and that was mean. And then you spend the next, 2 or 3 weeks, 3, 4 months, years trying to make up to that person for what you said. And it's just a bad way to deal with our emotions and our feelings and our things that just drive us and just sit in our mind. So when we're thinking about emotions, I want you to think, because you're writing, and how can you write about emotions and making it a very realistic example on paper or something, just bringing it out and showing people what is honest and sincere, making it real. And that's the same, realistic writing. So I always like to reference, especially in classical literature, because there's a reason why these books are still around today and still very popular, is because of the way they wrote, and they wrote with true emotion, true feelings, and they did wonderful pieces of work. And I'm going to reference the first section of Moby Dick, and we all know the story about Ahab and everything else, but I want you to really take a look at it from a different perspective. Step out of it, just not from a story, but let's look at the emotions and things that are occurring within Ahab. And this is the very first chapter, very, like mid through the first paragraph. And he goes, whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouse, I'm going grim. I'm just like, I can feel it. I'm just not happy anymore. And he goes, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul. And look at that, it's damp and drizzly, like it's cold and miserable. You go November, November, everything's dying. The fall is there. We're getting ready for winter. The leaves are changing, and everything just starts to look a little bit duller, a little bit more, just dead or dying, because it's just so cold, and there's no blossoming. The weather's cold, and you get those when it rains, it's just damp, it's nasty, and it just it makes your soul cold. And this is what he's talking about. And he goes, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin houses. So now he sees himself, not only is he damp and drizzly in his soul, he goes, he may be walking through the city, and then he stops at a coffin house, and he's staring at these coffins and just look, because he's so down. There's that presence of death. And he goes, I'm bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet. So not only is he pausing in front of coffin houses, now he's also following these processions of death to the, where somebody has passed, to the cemeteries. And he goes, and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me, it's just his anxiety and his thoughts, and he's like, it gets too much, and he can't control it, he can't contain it. And he goes, that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street and methodically knocking people's hats off. And this is something that we all feel. We get to a certain point where, like, I just can't take it anymore. This is driving me nuts. I just want to go up and just smack and knock the hat off of everybody I see. And this is what he's talking about, right? He goes, I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. So instead of taking his own life and saying, I can't take it anymore, but I know I've got to, he goes, I've got to get away. I've got to find a retreat. I got to reset myself and put myself in an even emotional state, right? And he goes, with a philosophical flourish, Cato throws himself upon his sword. I quietly take to the ship. So philosophically speaking, he goes, Cato throws himself upon his sword. So Cato being the individual that takes the tanto and then commits the Japanese suicide and falls on his sword, he goes, this is when I just go quietly to the ship. And he goes, there's nothing surprising in this. If they but knew it, almost all men in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings towards the ocean with me. So now what he's saying, he said, look, if everybody would admit it and look at it, he goes, look, this isn't surprising that we slip away, we get away. He says, but if people would actually think and focus, they would see that, hey, they have the same feelings as me. They say have the same frustrations. They have the same disappointments and fears. He says, but we all need to at some point get out to sea and refocus and reset. So now this is a great account of just a very small portion of Moby Dick, but it's a phenomenal example of how you can express emotions in writing and really be telling what's going on inside of you without actually even saying anything truly about yourself. But you could talk about frustration, you could talk about anger and disappointments and happiness and joy and setbacks and whatever it is that may be bothering you or on your mind, and that may be building up negatively in your your vault. And of course, happiness isn't something that goes in there, but it's how you write, emotionally speaking, writing with emotions. And these are just really good examples that I like, one of good examples that I like to share. So think about that the next time you sit down and write. First of all, are you writing sincerely and honestly about yourself? Are you writing as if somebody never had experienced or felt what you are feeling? And what are your emotions telling you? And use that as a way to write and be more creative. Well, I hope you enjoyed this micro session on writing with emotions and how we get there and how can we explore different avenues and views to get there. And I wish you happy writing. So once again, I'm Dr. Johnny G. Chavez III, and this is a micro session on Voices of Change, writing with emotions. Thank you.